Here is part 2 of our interview series with Planck Wine Club founder and owner Etty Loewenstein. We are talking about Spain today, so join us in this video. Hey guys, this is Todd with the Wine Club Group. You can find us online at wineclubgroup.com or check out our reviews and ratings of wine clubs at wineclubreviewsandratings.com. In our second part of this interview series with regard to Columbus Day wines, we are going to talk about Spain and Spanish wine with the founder of Planck Wine Club, Etty Loewenstein. Thank you so much for joining us once again.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I love to talk about wine, and I love Spanish wines. So we're fans here.
This is working out wonderfully. We talked all about Italian wines and Italy, and now we're going to drop some sweet knowledge on us about Spain and Spanish wines. So let's just jump right into it.
Sure.
Let's talk a little bit about the history of Spain and Spanish wines and a bit of the culture of wine there.
Sure. So Spain is like Italy, one of those regions that just produces an immense amount of wine, and an immense amount of wine made from so many different grapes that most people have never heard of. It's a very diverse viticultural region. There's a lot of coastal influence. There's a lot of influence from Portugal and from France. So you get really cool wines, very different from region to region, both in style and in the type of grapes they use. And there are wines that are really meant to be drunk with food. And the food culture in each of the regions where the wine is grown is also very different. And one of the cool things about most of these European regions, both Spain and Italy included, is the sort of rule that I go to when I talk about wine pairings is what grows together goes together. So you'll see a ton of seafood in the region of Galicia, which is on like the sort of northwestern coast of Spain. There's access to the water. There's a big fishing culture there. And the wines that they cultivate there are really made to match with the food. So you'll see a lot of really cool, clean, citrusy, mineral-driven whites. You've probably heard of the grape Albarino. Hails from a region called Rías Baixas, which is right within the area of Galicia. So that's just kind of an example of the diversity that you see in the regions and how the regions are really geared towards matching the wines that they grow with the food that's native to that area.
Now, is there when we discussed Italy, we're talking about the north, central area, and the south, and all the different terroir influences. How does that influence, and what kind of like sections or regions of Spain would you say in terms of geography and its influence on wine?
Sure. Well, Spain is shaped differently. So whereas with Italy, you get sort of a long, narrow land mass that's surrounded by water on different sides, and then different countries to the north. Spain is different. It's a much sort of, let's say, rounder shape, less of that length. But you still nevertheless get a lot of diversity. Depends on where you are. So like Jerez, which is the region where sherry is grown, is a very different region than, let's say, Rioja or Ribera del Duero, where you see a lot of Tempranillo and those kind of very ageable wines. So the regions are also sort of specialized in terms of what kind of style the wines there are made in, and also what grape varieties are grown there. And there's also a lot of climatic differences that you see. Once you get towards the coastal areas, you'll see the wines are made in a much more cool climate region. The style is different, much brighter acidity in the wines. They have that sort of tart freshness that you get from coastal wines, which is cool. There's a region, the sort of Basque area, that you get wines called Chacoli, which spelled really crazy, Texakoli.
I mean, that's exactly how I was going to spell it. Jeez.
Exactly. And they're really cool wines that are coastal as well. They're made by two different grape varieties, sometimes a blend, sometimes one or the other, called Ondaribi Zuri and Ondaribi Belza. So very different than Tempranillo, let's say. I mean, completely night and day. These wines are a little bit spritzy in style, not fully sparkling, but they have a little bit of that CO2, kind of a frizzante kind of bubble. And you also get something like that in Vinho Verde in Portugal, but talk about that another time. But you can see there's a ton of diversity, and there's a whole universe of really cool wines made in very different styles. Another one of my favorite regions, or let's call it two regions that are sort of situated next to each other, not far from Barcelona, actually. One of them is called Priorat. You might have seen wines from that area. sort of like blockbuster, very expensive wines, known for their reds, usually a blend of Grenache and Carignan. And there's a region that sort of surrounds Priorat that's called Montsant, which I kind of call like the baby Priorat. Wines are made in a very similar style as Priorat, same grape varieties for the most part, but they're just priced way lower. So it's sort of like the insider's Priorat, which so I like to pull wines from there. And I recently just used a wine in one of our wine clubs for this past month for October. That's the winery is called Xabec, Xabec. You get interesting, Catalan dialect in this area. And the grapes are Grenache and Carignan, and here they call them garnacha in Spanish, and cariñena is the Spanish word for the French grape Carignan. So that region is really cool, and the soil is also very unique in this particular area of Spain. They use a soil type there called licorella, which basically looks like a big gray sidewalk that you chopped up into huge chunks. And when you go into the vineyard, it's just like broken up, huge like chunks of asphalt. Very unique. You would never see that in other parts of Spain or maybe other parts of the world when you go to visit wine regions. You're not seeing much of that in Napa or Sonoma.
No kidding.
So yeah, very cool stuff, very different and very interesting. And the soil type really affects the expression in the glass when you're drinking the wine. So like we were talking about in the previous video about Italian wines, when a wine is grown on volcanic soils, you'll get that sort of smoky, flinty vibe from the wine. And that really comes from, from the volcanic soils. And you'll get the same thing in these two regions, Priorat and Montsant, from the Licorella soils. So really cool.
No kidding. Now, in terms of like their like big brands versus the smaller boutique off the beaten path hidden gems that you find, can you kind of give us a sense of like some of the things that we would see in those big box stores from Spain, and then some of those really cool boutique hidden gems that you uncover at Planck Wine Club?
Sure. Well, we'll start with the little boutiques. We'll get that out of the way, and then we'll talk about the bigger guys. So I mentioned one wine that we used recently from Montsant called Xabec. We also featured another wine made from Tempranillo, and it's from the area of Valdepeñas, which is another region that is kind of off the beaten path. You don't see a ton of wine coming in from there, but cool. The grape is familiar, Tempranillo, and that wine was called Ardales, Ardales. And then in terms of some more famous wineries, of course, there's Marqués de Riscal, which is very famous in Rioja. There's Bodegas LAN, which is a big one. There's so many big brands that you see coming out of Spain. And, the cool thing, again, is that whether you're looking for a big brand or a small brand, there is so much diversity. It's a really cool place for wine discovery. There's also been like an interesting shift in styles. Sort of old school Spanish winemakers used to use American oak. And you're seeing a shift more towards French oak these days. And the style of the wine is very different. With American oak in Spain, you get a wine that's much more polished, that has a lot more of that sort of butterscotch and vanilla and caramel in terms of its aromatics. And then when you use a French oak, it's a little bit more subtle, more cedar and spice and sort of different sorts of things. So Spain is, although it's sort of an old world country in Europe, it sort of straddles old world and new world in terms of the styles of the wines that come out of there.
That's cool. I had no idea that they actually would use American oak, and then so like as an industry as a whole, they're kind of shifting over to French oak now.
They are, and it's not. I wouldn't say there's like a general trend, but it's sort of varies region by region, and particular wines, which grapes lend themselves to being aged in oak to begin with, and then once they're in oak, they have a choice: do they want to use American or French? But historically, the famous wines out of Spain were made with American oak. So it's very interesting.
So before we go, I know we're running low on time. My neighbors are from Mallorca.
Cool.
And they get to go out there once a summer with their family, or their family comes here. And if you don't know it off the top of your head now, I do have to ask you later. I really need to know like something about Mallorca or Mallorca-based wine, so I can like totally blow their minds and tell them that, yeah, I know this, and you had no idea that I'm so smart and I know people. So
Yeah, well, there's a very cool Spanish importer named Jose Pastor. We use many of his wines in our clubs, and he's based in San Francisco. And his specialty is sort of like small boutique wines from different parts of Spain that are not the typical heavy hitters, Rioja, Ribera del Duero, those types of areas. And he really pulls wines from the Canary Islands in Mallorca and that whole region. And the grape varieties you see there are very different. One of them, I think, from the Canary Islands is called Listan Negro. Ever heard of that? Probably not. So very, very cool. People are definitely starting to discover these wines. They really did not get much press or playtime at all in the past. And as people are sort of getting bored of the kind of tried and true regions and wanting to discover more, they're starting to look into areas like Mallorca and the Canary Islands and other regions like that.
well, that's a great note or topic for us to stop on here, because that's again one of the things that we really love about Plonk Wine Club is that's exactly what you do. You go off the beaten path and you stay away from the big brands and find those little boutique wines and hidden gems, and give us an opportunity to learn more about wine and expand our wine palate and knowledge. And thank you once again for helping us in that venture here with regard to this video. So
Absolutely. It's my absolute pleasure to be here. Thanks so much.
we really highly recommend Plonk Wine Club, and thanks once again. Look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Great. Take care. Bye.